Hi guys, this is Vitaly with AFT Dispatch and A2C Logistics, and in today's video I decided to come out to a local coffee shop and talk about a very important subject. Now this video is going to be a lot more in-depth, and sorry for any wind noise that you might hear, but yeah, it's going to be a much more in-depth video. What we're going to be covering is coronavirus, the pandemic, how it's affecting the industry, how it's affecting regulations, truck drivers, what we can expect in the future. And I've taken some notes down here. You know, obviously the pandemic has, really changed the world. It's changed not only the United States, but the entire world as we know it, and how we do business, how we purchase products, e-commerce, and scientists and analysts, they're saying it's going to take a long time to get back to normal. We've obviously already seen that from, February, March, April and May. We've seen decreases in freight. We've seen decreases in freight volume and rates. We've seen things really take a toll. A lot of companies have had to, shut down. By the way, being safe here, got my trusty N95 mask. Just not gonna wear it at the moment so that you guys can understand where I'm coming from, what I'm saying. Got my drinks, so things are good. But yeah, scientists are saying it's gonna take a long time to get back to normal. And when it comes to the trucking industry, I've been harping on this for months and months. If you go back to my old videos, you'll see that we were actually right on in terms of our predictions and what we were thinking was going to happen in the industry. And because of that, we revamped how we approached truckloads, the freight market, and our customers, whether they were owner operators or leased on under us, or carriers under their own operating authority, MC authority, they all benefited from this. They were all able to stay in business, stay afloat, make it through this tough time. And now, recording this in the middle of June, towards the end of June, July, this is July, we're seeing a lot of these guys starting to benefit, just like I said they would. So when it comes to the trucking industry, we've all seen the rates. February, March, April, and further on, now we're seeing increases in freight, and that's very good. But some states like California, they're beginning to shut down again. If that happens, we are going to see an impact to the industry, right? To the freight industry, especially with a lot of the produce that's coming out of California. And as far as the PCH coast, this pandemic is definitely affecting transportation, logistics, from standpoints of both health, safety, operations, and economics. It's hard to predict what will happen in the next 6 months. Needless to say, years ahead. It's obviously very difficult. And one thing's for sure, America stops if trucking stops. We have seen this. We know that's the case. We know that's the truth. And this is why truckers need to be kept healthy. And as I mentioned in the previous video, while truckers are considered low risk because they don't come in contact with a lot of folks that are sick, or it's a low contact industry. Unfortunately, the average trucker has a higher age than other professions, and as far as the average American, truckers are less healthy than the average American. There are pre-existing conditions like, and I mentioned this in a previous video too, it can compromise immune systems, from hypertension, diabetes, obesity, sleep apnea, things like that. So there are things to consider, and they're certainly much more susceptible to poor outcomes if they do contract the virus. And so we definitely want to keep truckers safe. Without, like I said, without truckers, America stops, right? So some shippers and some receivers, of course, they've started, checking drivers' temperatures. They've started to implement different changes into their day-to-day operations, and a lot of them aren't allowing people to come out of the cabs. They have stay in cab rules. They have certain things that they've put into place for their employees, right? So a lot more stringent rules on washing hands, wearing masks, disinfecting both product and equipment, things like that. A lot more hand sanitizer use, things like that. And as far as the trucking industry, in terms of the economy, I think this is something that we're definitely very interested in, and freight opportunities at the same time. We had a slow 2019 from the get-go. We had a hard hit 2020. 2021 looks like it's going to have some troubles to come, depending on who you ask. So there are, and I'll cover this a little bit through further in this video. So some say that there will be issues, some say that things will actually improve, but it depends on who you ask and what perspective you take and from which angle you actually study this information. Now, freight transportation is obviously directly tied to the US economy. It is actually a direct indicator of how well the economy is doing in the United States. We can see this as part of the GDP. And we've seen slowdowns. We've seen slowdowns in 2020. The official GDP numbers aren't out until next year, but I guarantee you we're going to see some major hits to the GDP. So trucking has slowed down, right? There have been slowdowns in truck manufacturing. Again, I've talked about this in a previous video. There have been higher orders of trucks. There have been, replacements for different fleets. There have been revamps to older equipment, but generally speaking, overall year to year, we're going to see truck manufacturers slow down, truck purchases slow down. There's going to be less orders. And again, it's a strong indicator for the transportation industry. We've seen low freight counts. That's led to low freight rates. Those of you, that have been hauling freight in the previous few months, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of truckers just sitting around, can't find any freight. The freight that you do find, if you're lucky enough, they find it in, an 80-cent dollar freight, certainly below operating costs, and that's tough. Plus, the overall economy has been lagging behind. Consumer spending's been low, so there's all these issues. Now, Dominique Bonnet, he's the principal consultant at Frost & Sullivan, and he said that he expects medium and heavy-duty truck sales to be 50% lower compared to last year. So that's saying something, right? Now, at the same time, truck lots are overflowing with used equipment. The same can be said about Ritchie Brothers, like auction houses, things like that. A lot of times they've had to actually borrow parking space from nearby truck stops in order to fill their parking spots because they had overflow. That's opportunity to buy some really decent quality, well-maintained used equipment, but not everybody has the money and not everyone is able to stay afloat at this time. The reason why this is worse, this pandemic, than the 2008-2009 economic crisis is because disposable income losses were much more severe during this pandemic. And that obviously leads to purchases of different types of products that we ship, right? I mean, we keep America going. Like I said, if it's not for trucking, America stops, bottom line. We all know that. And this pandemic is, much more severe than in those years, considering the 15% unemployment rate in April, right? April of this year, 15% unemployment rate. Consider that March was really hit really hard. We saw those numbers because the quarter ended. Now that's compared to 10% during the peak of the previous crisis, 2008-2009. We saw about a 10% unemployment rate. 15% is huge. True numbers, that 5% difference, huge difference. It's absolutely a huge difference. And the stimulus checks have helped, but that only helped cover part of people's monthly expenses. After that, they're on their own and they couldn't go to work. They weren't allowed to travel. Companies had closed down. A lot of people were furloughed. A lot of people were just simply fired. Now, the drop in consumer spending is keeping freight demands low for non-essential goods. And you've seen the hours of service regulations being amended by the FMCSA for essential goods, and we'll talk about that as well. But what this is all causing is bankruptcies and consolidations in the transportation sector, different trucking companies having to really change things around. And as most of you know, trucking's a very thin margin business, right? It's a high costs, high liabilities. I mean, if you've been trucking even for a few days even out there, how much it costs to fill up a truck's fuel tank. Plus, there's been a lot of talk about increasing insurance rates or total insurance coverage, more than doubling the required minimum requirements by the FMCSA. That's going to hit, if that passes, that's going to hit the trucking industry really hard. So the good news is that the International Monetary Fund predicts that global economies will rebound in 2021. So that's that one side that's very positive. They're looking at that. And it's a very strong conglomerate. The International Monetary Fund is huge, and they have a lot of data and a lot of number crunching that goes on there, statistical analysis. So we can take that as a very positive indicator of where things are going. Now, a supply and demand imbalance is likely to result in tighter carrier capacity in 2021, and that would lead to rates increasing, right? So obviously, that makes sense. So again, you want to be in business. I've been harping on this for a long time. I get it, 80, 90 cent freight's cheap. Luckily, we don't have to deal with that at this moment. I mean, just watch the video prior to this and come back every week, because we're going to, I've already talked about this, but we're going to have weekly segments where we're actually going to look at real loads that we've booked for our carriers and our owner operators. We're looking at lanes and rates and dollar amounts and commodities and what they've done and where they went from there. And we're just being completely transparent. We're showing you guys that we're not just talking about these things. Like, here are the books, they're opened up, take a look. So we're very, very open about this. So as you can see, I mean, we're booking $2, $3 per mile rates, even on long miles. A lot of people don't believe such things exist, but the proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? So, you know, supply and demand imbalance, it's going to increase rates. If you're still in business during that time, you're going to make up the difference that you've lost during the first 2 months of 2020. They're also recommending that while you work on staying afloat, currently, same thing as I've been telling people, it doesn't benefit you to close down, because the market will improve, as it's starting to already, if you're out of business. The guys that have stayed in business, they're the ones who are taking advantage of the high freight rates right now, the high paying loads that we're booking for them, and they're making their money. They're making the difference. So you should be planning for 2021 and 2022, because this pandemic and everything that's occurring around it is affecting not only our day-to-day life, but it's affecting the trucking industry with the type of freight we're moving, how we're moving this freight, all the regulations around in the trucking industry. There are lots of checks and balances that are being recalibrated at this point, right? And this means having to readjust our operations and US-based manufacturing and material sourcing, basically products that are made in the United States, US-based manufacturing, getting stuff in our country rather than importing it from other countries. That's changing. That's increasing. That's an increase. There's been some scrutiny due to temporary, product shortages, and that's led to companies and people saying enough is enough. Let's start producing in America. Let's start, utilizing our resources. Let's start building things again in the United States, and that has been a big thing that's been changing throughout 2020, and this will result in changes of what we'll be transporting, the types of products, the types of commodities, and also how we'll be transporting, right? As more and more brick and mortar stores close, consumers are turning to e-commerce, online shopping, more and more Amazon, right? And just other websites like Walmart, for example. A lot more people are ordering online. That's turning into more shipments of packages, small packages having to be shipped. So again, the types of freight is also changing, because last mile parcel delivery volume has increased substantially. Now you might think this doesn't really affect trucking, right? FTL, full truckloads, but it does, because that product has to arrive at distribution centers somehow. Major carriers like USPS, UPS, FedEx, and of course Amazon now is a major carrier. Those have all increased their volume, right? So this is good. Good news for hotshots, for expedited delivery companies, but it also, like I said, affects semi-truck companies because of deliveries. This product has to arrive at distribution centers, and it's going to be guys like our customers who run full-size semi-trucks that will bring this product to the distribution centers, and then that will go around throughout the country for last mile deliveries. Long-haul truckers, detention times, they've basically ticked up during this pandemic. Now, I'm not saying that shippers and receivers are paying the detention as they need to. Unfortunately, a lot of them are still making excuses, lying on their paperwork, on the BOLs. The timestamps are all wrong. They're using every tactic that they've used in the past to not pay detention. But unfortunately, the times have ticked up. The reason for this is because of the time it takes to carry out extra safety and other precautions with, sanitizing practices, different types of safety that's had to be put into place, and making sure that the people that are unloading and loading the trucks are in a different mindset, if you will, right? Because everybody right now, it's really hard to work in a mask. I don't care what anybody says. It's really hard to unload a truck in a mask. The other thing, turnover rates. Everybody knows trucking has had always systematically has had extremely high turnover rates. But turnover rates have plummeted since the start of the pandemic. The reason for this is because people are holding on to the jobs that they have. So if they have a job, they're holding on to it. They're doing everything they can to make sure that the company is happy with their performance and that they're going to have their job in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months. People used to jump around in the trucking industry. That's not happening anymore. These lower turnover rates, they've led to fewer training costs, lower truck driver accident rates, contributing to fewer accidents since there's less traffic. More people are staying at home, and less traffic means shorter trip times, which means you could take on additional loads, take on more deliveries, which for independent owner ops, for carriers operating under their own authority, that has meant more money in their pocket. Regulation-wise, we've seen the FMCSA, as I mentioned, change the hours of service regulations, the HOS regulations. They have put some exemptions out there for emergency relief supplies and for essential goods. A lot of you guys have taken advantage of that. That has recently kicked back in. What we saw during that time is rates were spiking when HOS regulations were put into exemption mode for those specific product types, commodity types. And then we saw a drastic drop in freight rates. So I don't know if we're going to see the same thing. I think it's going to be a little bit different this time. This is the same thing I've been talking about going all the way back to March. If you go back to the March videos, I was telling people that, look, even though the rates are going down, warehouses, distribution centers are running out of product. It has to be refilled, just like anywhere else, right? What's the takeaway for truckers in America? My stance is the same as it has been since the beginning, since I've started making these videos at the beginning of the year, right from the get-go. Truckers must keep going. They must keep trucking on. They have to stay in business so they can take advantage of rate spikes that will come. I certainly haven't changed my mind about this. The coming increases in freight volume rates won't benefit you if you're out of business. Bottom line. I've been telling this to all the people. They don't understand. And I get why they don't understand. You guys are behind the wheel. You're sleeping at truck stops. You don't see the markets. But believe me, the dispatchers are working very, very hard to get you the freight that you need. And during the time when we were booking extremely cheap freight that was below operating costs, believe me, we understand. But many other truckers out there weren't even getting those loads. Right now, rates are up. That's the benefit, right? So you have to keep going, and the coming increases in freight volumes and the rates, they will come. It is, I mean, you're already seeing it. We're already seeing it right now, and every trucker in America needs to have a plan if the coronavirus is to resurge, if you will, right, or re-emerge this coming fall and winter, because experts are predicting this. This is supposed to happen. We're not even talking about wave 2. We're already seeing increases during wave 1, and with all the closures and the reopenings. So wave 2 might be several times worse. So maybe this is just the beginning. So we need to plan for 2020, 2021, and as they say, even 2022. So long-term planning. So all in all, I gotta say is keep trucking, keep on trucking. Use, a good dispatch service. Gotta toot my own horn here. Gotta make sure you have good dispatchers that actually understand freight market dynamics, understand commodities, lanes, and save your money for a rainy day, because that's very likely to come sooner than later. And here's the thing, again, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, because the weekly videos that we're producing, the weekly segment videos that we're producing, we're going to be covering actual loads that we booked. And you'll see, because I put up a map for every single load that we're booking, that I'm showing you. I put up a map, you can see that, tell you the miles, the rate per mile, the dollar amount, the commodity when I know it, and whether it's a solo or a team, and all the details that I can, I get it to you. The trailer type, etc. So the bottom line is this: the loads are there. We're getting you this type of freight. We're getting you what you need in order to survive. But the future is very uncertain. So I highly recommend getting a good truck dispatch service, leasing on with a company that's not costing you an arm and a leg. Like our company, for example, we have one of the lowest lease on costs. We're very transparent about the expenses. We actually break it down in our weekly statements. And we know what it costs to lease on an owner-operator, and I'll tell you that the vast majority of companies out there are taking advantage of truckers that lease on with them by not being transparent and by keeping the difference between what you pay and what it actually costs. So I highly recommend that you take a look at your expenses, calculate the percentages, and see, is it really worth it? If you want to get more information about both of our services, go to our website at aftdispatch.com/go or give me a call. Number's 801-448-6363, extension 1. All the information's in the description box. Leave a comment, like the video, make that thumbs up button blue, nice and blue. That really helps us with YouTube's algorithm. And if you have any questions, leave a comment below, and I'll cover that in future videos. Anyway, guys, take care. I hope this video has been useful to you, and we'll talk soon. Bye.